Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Watching Mental Health. And I am excited because today's episode is a little bit different, but I think still really an important conversation when it comes to mental health. And I am joined today by JD Tremblay, and he is an ultra endurance triathlete who's achieved amazing things, including recently completing the Epic Decca, which is an accomplishment that only 3 people in the world have been able to attain. So I'm going to ask more about that. But JD is more than that. He's a military veteran, an engineer, a first responder, and an endurance athlete who has spent his life really learning how to build the kind of mental fortitude that's needed to carry you through not just extreme physical challenges, but also everyday ones that most of us are quietly battling, things like depression. And depression doesn't leave after you climb the mountain. He says it's how you cope with it that changes your life. And so his memoir, Hunger for More in Life, is a must read for anyone who's wanting to learn more about how to set and reach goals. It's an inspiring story about how to overcome those mental as well as physical obstacles, no matter what. And today on Watching Mental Health, we're going to be talking about what it takes to develop the mental fortitude that you need for success, both in life and maybe in more extreme places, why it's important for high achievers to be looking at their mental health, and how life in the military and as a first responder can impact mental health, why it's important to be thinking about that in these various careers and situations. And so with that, welcome to the show, JD.
Yeah, thanks for having me, JD.
Thank you so much for being here. And I always like to kick off every show by just asking to tell us a little bit more about, your journey and kind of what brought you to this line of work. And usually I ask it in the terms of mental health, but, for you, I kind of want to ask, what made you decide to, write that memoir? What made you decide to start talking about these topics like mental success and mental fortitude and resilience, and why it's important to be thinking about your mental health when you face these different, extreme challenges in life?
Yeah, it's a great question. For me, it was after the Epic Decca. A lot of people were asking me how was I able to accomplish that feat, and apparently the answer is not it's natural or I just did it. Yeah, I had to give them a clear plan, and I wanted
Mm.
to share some insights about the feat and that they could apply it as well. So I decided to write a book about it with some advice, and that's how it became a bestseller in 3 different language. And I was
Wow,
not expecting that. Yeah.
that's amazing. So the book really hit home. It sounds like it resonated with people.
Yeah. At first, we had a lot of people reach out, thinking that it was only for triathletes because there is a triathlete on the cover. They thought that it was only for, and then a lot of people were thinking that it was for athletes or about them, and and then the more that people read it, it was about the mental struggles that everybody has, and so you don't have to be an athlete to have these mental struggles and these barriers in your life that are preventing you. We all have these certain challenges and these mental blockages. And so I give some concise advice on how to overcome them.
That's really cool. And I think that it's really cool because you walk the talk. And so before I get much further, what is an
Mm.
Epic Deca? Tell our audience, what is that, and why is it so hard to accomplish?
Yeah. So the Epic Deca is a triathlon, which is 3 sports into one. So swimming, biking, and running. There are different distances within a triathlon, and one of them is that people might be familiar with is the Olympic distance, and another one that people might be aware of is the Ironman. So you might have a friend
Okay.
or a
Hmm.
coworker that have done an Ironman. The Ironman consists of 2.4 miles of swimming, 112 miles of cycling, and then you follow it up with a full marathon all into one event. So for the Epic Decca, Decca that stands for 10 in Latin, it's 10 Ironman distance on 10 consecutive days over the course of 6 Hawaiian islands. So not only do you
Oh,
finish one Ironman, but then you pack your items, you fly to the next one,
wow.
and then you compete or complete another Ironman distance, and then so on and so forth until you reach the final island, and then you complete 10 Ironman. So there were 10 people registered for this feat because of the logistics. They were only allowing 10 people. 6 people showed up on the start line, and only 3 people in the world finished. So I'm one of
Wow.
three. I'm one of those 3 that completed this event.
That's such an accomplishment. So my next question is, what during those long hours, and those long days, what kept you going? Like what is that mental fortitude that someone really needs to keep going through a challenge, right? To keep going through an obstacle.
Well, it's about looking at it from a map perspective. So if I give you, Katie, a map and I tell you, here's a treasure, here's a certain amount of money that
Mhm.
is hidden.
Mhm.
I don't tell you exactly on the map where is that treasure, and I say go. Then what would be your first step? Well, your first step would be to understand where you're at on the map. Like,
Yeah.
what are the abilities that you have? What are the
Mm.
tools that you have? And many people in life are just going through the motion in survival mode and trying to get through with finances or in their relationships, not really understanding what they're good at. What are
Mhm.
their attributes? How are they created? What's your purpose? So understanding where you're at on the map is important. The second one is understanding what is the treasure that you're seeking?
Right.
Where is that treasure? Or at the very least, in the vicinity of where are you where are you looking at on the
Mhm.
map? So that you can go to the third step, which is a direction. So for me, my direction was completing the Epic Deck. I was not competing. I just wanted to finish this event. So I understood what I was capable of. I understood what the mission was, and I gave myself a direction and a clear, concise direction as to where I would go toward that goal. So
Mhm.
for me, there was no turning left or turning right, um, having some mental blockages along the way. There was none at all. I understood what the mission was. It was clear and concise in my head. I had to complete that event, no matter the cost. I was controlling all the variables that I could, and God had to deal with all the variables that I couldn't handle. So that's how I did it.
That's really interesting because you really can apply those 3 steps to life, right? Not just with extreme sports, but with anything, right? You think about where are you, in your relationship, in your career, what's that treasure you're looking for? Where do you want to be, right? And then how do you get there? And kind of what do you need to make that happen? So, I think that's a really cool visual, to be honest.
Well, that's what I used in my life, right? And then I wrote in my book, it's
Mm.
if your goals don't scare you, then set the bar higher.
Hmm.
So I place those goals high as I can, and then I give myself directions, and then I understand what I'm capable of doing. It's scary, but there is success on the other side of something that you have to overcome because it requires a certain level of courage. And people have always admired people that use courage to achieve a certain feat. May it be that it's having a long lasting marriage, or accomplishing certain feats, and as a police officer or firefighter, or in
Mhm.
other or a military person. So
Mhm. Yeah, that's really cool. I think that's important to think about. And I had my next question lined up, but I was really into what you were saying. But as far as, high achievers go, why is it important to, because I think a lot of my audience is probably maybe high achievers, right? They have big goals that they're going after. Why is it important to be thinking about, mental health along the way? Especially in terms of things like depression or burnout, or even if you're in, sort of an extreme career that maybe can have some PTSD. Like, why is it important to be thinking about those things as somebody who is a high achiever?
well, it's the same system as to understand where you're at on the map. If, for instance, you understand that you haven't slept in 3 days or 4 days, or you haven't slept well, let's put it this way, after 4 days,
Sure.
you're having hallucination. So, so if you haven't slept well in over 3, 4 days, or maybe longer, then you understand that sleep might be at the top of the pyramid in terms of what is required for the journey. It's not
Okay.
necessarily just having the direction, having the goal, having the discipline every single day, and knowing that you really want, or having these affirmations and telling yourself about the treasure and reminding yourself with sticky notes. And it's also about resting. So understanding that where you are at, because you mentioned three major ones that are out there, three major mental struggles. You mentioned depression, you mentioned burnout, and you also mentioned PTSD. PTSD
Yeah.
is in the nervous system, and a nervous dysregulation. um, Now, many people might be misusing it also, but there's a depressive state, and Dr. Jordan Peterson elaborated what depression is, and it's a repetitive cycle. So he's saying that it's a repetitive cycle of negative behaviors that are not in alignment with your goals, and that creates a certain level of depression.
Wow.
So when you're looking at guys that are not in the right job for
Mhm.
many, many, many years, and then um, their relationships are eroding, their family relationships is in chaos, their entire life is in disorder, then eventually you will end up having a certain level of depression, no matter how high of an achiever you are. And then the burnout portion very often has to do with the energy regulation of the body. So understanding
Okay.
that your body is requiring rest. Your body is okay. I'm not against energy drinks, but an overindulgence of this
Right.
so-called drug, of these um, energy drinks types.
Right. Mhm.
That's where the problem lies. If you're doing an ultra event, and then you're kicking back some Coca-Cola or some other sugary drinks, then that might suit what is required for that event. But then going and operating heavy machinery, you might not necessarily need that. What you might need is more on the lines of um, a detox of all of the chemicals that are surrounding you on a work site.
Mhm.
Somewhat like I'm using a blue collar analogy, but
Mhm.
so again, sometimes the burnout is simply an energy regulation.
Mhm.
So it's understanding that you're always going to be brought down back down to the level of training that you have, that is at the highest level of training that you have. You'll always be brought down back to that highest level. So it's up to you to make sure that you are trained to the best of your abilities in that capacity that you are. Hence why for the Epic Decca, for me, it just required an extra level of training to be ready to complete that feat.
Sure. Yeah, wow, that's very insightful. It sounds like I mean, you know a lot about kind of each of these. How have you and it also sounds like depending on your situation, right, the tools and how you get it's different, right? We've kind of established that, but maybe, when you're feeling a little bit off in, your next goal, right? And that work towards that next goal, kind of what do you do to kind of try to get yourself out of that burnout mode or out of that depression mode? Does it come down to mostly rest? It sounds like rest is really important. Are there other tools that you use too?
Yeah, there are many tools. One of them is simply a mindset tool where you have to understand that if it's something that is negative that happened to you, then to transfer the negative into something constructive. So there is negative into negative where you have something negative happen to you. And we're looking at it from, let's say, the lens of a guy who has a breakup. Okay. He really liked a girl and something happened where now they broke up. So it's negative. Now, if he turns it into a negative, he starts drinking.
Mm,
So nothing wrong with drinking. Okay. I take a drink once in a while, but
sure.
drinking for that specific purpose you might ensue some behaviors that are not conducive to the growth that you are seeking
Right.
in in the long term. So it turns a negative into a negative. That's just an example. Now the guy goes through the exact same breakup as the same guy, and he says, "I'm going to turn it into a positive." And so you go to therapy and then you start thinking everything positive, and then you just release it to the environment, or then you put it on a piece of paper and then you tear it apart and you throw it in the water, and then you just think positively, and then well, thermodynamic proves that turning a charge from one state to another without doing any work. So changing something from a negative to a positive requires work. And there is also a loss somewhere that is even greater, as if you would transfer it from something negative to constructive, which is completely
Interesting.
different.
Mm-hmm.
So that guy now is just thinking positive, like with her, which eventually doesn't ensue to something great because they
Mm-hmm.
broke up for a reason. So now he's thinking positive. When he meets her, he wants to get back with her, which might not be the solution.
Right.
Maybe it is, but maybe it isn't in his case. Now, transferring something from negative to constructive is completely different. What you're doing is you're saying, what do I need to survive in this world? And so this guy always wanted to have a great body, be in shape. And so this guy now goes to the gym. So
Mm-hmm.
whether he thinks negatively about the situation and says, "Oh, this girl," and then he calls her names in his head, he still works out, which is constructive.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if he thinks positively and he says, "Oh, I miss her so much," I'm thinking positive, he's still going to the gym, which is
Right.
constructive towards the goal that he wants to achieve for his life. And so that's transferring something negative into something constructive.
Mm.
And that mindset can carry you a long way.
Wow, that's really interesting. I've actually never heard that before, and I've heard a lot of different tools for this. So that's really, really cool. And I think just, yeah, that, it's just a change in mindset a little bit, right? It's changing in how you are approaching something and taking control of what you can.
Yeah, definitely.
That's very cool. I just, yeah. So, let's switch a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about the military and first responders, about your experience. And, in the past, we haven't talked like, I know when it comes to the military, we've talked quite a bit about military and PTSD. I find that first responders haven't really been discussed in regards to mental health as much as they are, I think, post pandemic, I would say, that people are really kind of recognizing the work that they put in. And so, just talk to me a little bit about your experience there and, why it is important to, have self care, to have rest, right? To have mental health, to avoid burnout when you are in these types of careers.
Well, it's important to be fit because of two reasons. One is if you are going to be in the position of a person that is going to perform that duties, you want to reflect it as if we would flip the tables and you were in distress. Would you want that person to go and save your life?
Right.
And if the answer is no, then you have a problem and then
Mm.
you should fix it. And that fix can come sometime from the regulation, which is the second part, where it's important to be physically fit and mentally fit, because once you can do um, these tasks, once you are having certain stimuli that are oftentimes extreme, then you're able to regulate your system much faster than other people. So
Mm.
we're seeing an increase with PTSD, and it has nothing to do with the amount that people are seeing, but more so on the decrease of the level of training that people are ready to see and to regulate their system
Wow.
towards these types of um, towards these type of stimuli. Because if we look at it, we look at the statistics of World War II veterans. We look at the statistics of uh, Vietnam. that was a shocking experience. Just reading through the history of it.
Hmm.
Those guys, like picture this, okay? You're in Vietnam and you have to go and smell burning bodies and torch those bodies on top of that.
Yeah.
And you have to stay in that trench smelling it sometime for weeks at a
Oh my gosh. Wow.
so you're reading through it, and there is a significant amount of guys that came out of World War II and even less in World War II, but well, per capita than in Vietnam, that came back and had less PTSD than what we have today. And so we have to ask the question as to, is the system really helping, or is it compounding the effect that we have on mental health?
Mm. That's really interesting. Yeah, and I mean, you're right. The numbers are higher today. It feels like our veterans, in some ways get less support. I'm not sure how our first responders, do.
Even
Um,
less.
so yeah, and
Yeah,
and
even
so
less.
that's tough. Like these are people who are our front lines, right? Who are going into the fire quite literally, and they really do need more support than what they're getting.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you need the right tools. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's the idea. You need the right tools and the right mindset to achieve the task that you have been called to do. If that is your purpose, there are guys that are highly claustrophobic and become firefighters and perform very well and still go through tight spaces.
Yeah.
Why? Is
Right.
because they are doing the mental training that is required prior to going into a storm. So once you're in the storm, you understand the complexity of it. And then once
Mm.
you're coming out of it, then there is a form of reward. That's not to say that you will not have I did have all of those symptoms of waking up in the morning, waking up in the morning, waking up in the middle of the night, and you have those night sweat. Your entire sheets are drenched. Uh,
Sure.
and it's not like you went to the pool of anything, or I have some sudation problem. And then you have those flashbacks of car accident. It's that you're able to regulate your system and you're able to operate at another level. You understand that that these might happen to you, but you understand how to regulate your system. So it's the
Mm-hmm.
tools that are important and the
Mm-hmm.
practical aspect, because you can get lost into a system just talking about your feelings, which talking about your feelings will not get you to overcome PTSD and burnout and all of these. It won't. I have yet to see anyone overcome any of these by just sitting on a chair and talking about their feelings. That's not how it has been doing. There are some practical aspect if you're talking about it. There is a reward system talking about it, and then there are there is a debriefing somewhat. But what happened very often, um, in even as firefighters, very 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 often you go through an operation, and then as you go back to the fire station, you just put your bunker or put your gear into the washing machine, or you just wash it, and then
Mm-hmm.
you're just going through the motion. There's no form of debrief, which just removes those tools. So it's not about talking about the feelings and like it's talking about the an action plan, essentially the briefing or the debriefing. There's a briefing portion where you're training for the task, and there's a debriefing portion where you must understand what went wrong and how can you
Yeah.
fix it. And that is the key.
Wow. That's really interesting. And I think that that's pretty spot on, right? Like, I think there's a time and a place for talking, but it should be structured and in a way, for things like this, like, yeah, briefing and debriefing and other tools are needed. It can't just be talking about your feelings. It's got to be applying other tools in order to work on your mindset, your burnout, your energy levels. All of it matters.
Yeah, exactly. Those guys, see, back then knew each other. They were talking about their family. They were talking about their likes, their dislikes. There was some form of
Mm,
brotherhood. Very often,
yeah,
even nowadays, in some fire station, you see the guys, they're just going through the motion or just getting the paycheck. And then there's no form of cohesion. Now, I'm not saying all firehouses are like this. That's not what I'm claiming. I'm not saying the entire
sure.
military is like that. What I'm saying is that there's a form of division that has been placed now where everybody just fits into these categories or these groups, and are not a band of brothers anymore. And so there is no sense of unity. And when you don't understand how the person in front of you that is holding sometime your life in their
Right,
hand, where you're
right.
holding a hose, you're having a fire, and oftentimes you don't even see anything. It's completely pitch black, and the guy behind is the only one that sees because he has the thermal camera. So he's
Wow.
the only one that sees what's going on. And and so you have to rely on the guy behind you, and somehow he doesn't even know anything about you. Or what if you have the guy's life in your hand and you don't even know how he's going to react because he's going
Right.
through a divorce, or he's going through that breakup that I was talking about. And because he's going through that breakup, now he's having some mental struggles that might put other people at risk. So
Yeah.
those are certain key factors. So again, it's not about talking about feelings. I don't want to hear about people's feelings. When when we have circles and I leave. I don't have to talk and I don't have to hear about them. What I want to talk about is action plan. how we're going to move and what is going on in your life. Those are things that I can relate to and I can
Mm,
understand, not just feelings. Feelings is an experience of life, because there are some fires you get there, and there was a time one time it was a big car accident. I'm laughing because and it's insensitive, and because I can talk about it now, I guess. You get there and you get these cars and they're piled up, and I'm happy. I'm excited. I'm genuinely excited. And I remember planting my feet before and understanding I have to hide my smile because
mm,
I'm happy. So again, these feelings are completely erratic.
sure.
They might be out of place, and they might be uh not in alignment with the situation that is happening. But despite me touching a door and
Mm,
feeling sad or feeling happy, people need firefighters to break down that door to go save someone's life. And so they need an action plan, and they need to understand, how can I get to that treasure?
yeah. Yeah, and they need, support in what that looks like for them. So a brotherhood, a village, right? The tools, the mindset. So, yeah, I think all of that really matters, and, we forget about a lot of these things. So I'm glad that we're talking about it now. Before we go, I just have one last question, and really, it's yeah, well, maybe it's a twofer. So I would say, first is, what would be kind of the biggest lesson that you took from your experience in the Epic Decca, and second is, do you have any other kind of big, plans coming up, big goals that you're working towards again?
Yeah. The big lesson that I learned in the Epic Deca was definitely that I had to focus on the task at hand, not
Hmm.
necessarily comparing myself to others, because comparison, or I believe it's Emerson that said that comparison is suicide. And so
Mm,
it's by comparison, you're not aligned with your own values, and therefore
mm,
decreasing your value and what you can provide to the world, because we all have something different to provide.
yeah.
The big plan that we're working on right now
Yeah.
is well, the next race is this Sunday actually. So I'm assuming this this episode won't be released until then, but it's on Sunday. So we're racing for children, and
Aw.
it's I'm doing a high rocks. So it's a full high rocks in firefighting gear with the tanks, and that's to raise funds for the children's.
Wow, that's amazing. That is so cool. Your life is really, interesting, and it just sounds like, you're always kind of doing something really extreme, and it makes you happy. You seem like such a happy person. And so I'm really glad to have you on the show and to, show an example of, what mental fortitude really looks like, and, how anybody can kind of follow some of these tools that you've given us.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. Anybody can. There's
That's
nothing
right.
special about JD. I just decide I'm gonna live in faith rather than in fear, and that's it.
Yeah.
Like, so I try to be as courageous as I can be. It doesn't mean that I don't live with certain mental struggles. It just means I'm human and I make mistakes, and anybody can live through these mental struggles, and get much better at handling those difficult situations. So yeah, thank you very much, Katie, for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's beautiful. And for anybody who maybe wants to see your journey or read your book, how can they get in touch or follow you to learn more?
Yeah, it's hungrywarrioracademy.com is our website, and then we're on all social media as well under Hungry Warrior Academy.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you. And then where can people get your book if they're interested?
Yeah, it's on. It's available on Amazon.
Okay.
Hunger for More in Life.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah. So I think we're all on Amazon these days. Well, thank you so much again for coming to the show. Your story is really beautiful, and I think that the advice is really going to hit home for a lot of our audience. And thank you to everybody for listening to another episode of Watching Mental Health. And we will see you next time. Have a good one, everyone.